Okay, it looks like everybody's here. Can you all hear me? A little thumbs up. Great. So if you want to leave your camera off or turn it off, whatever you're most comfortable with, I would suggest that in the little view corner, if you set it to speaker view, that way when our guest is speaking, you will be able to see him. And then if you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat, and I will ask those after our reading. So I'm really excited to be here. My name is Shani Youngdahl, and I'm an assistant professor of writing here at Lindenwood University. Thank you so much for joining us in our first event this fall. So tonight we're really pleased to welcome Ira Sukrungruang, and he's the author of the memoirs This Jade World, Buddha's Dog and Other Meditations, Southside Buddhist, which won the 2015 American Book Award, and Talk Thai, The Buddhist Boy. He's also the author of the short story collection, The Melting Season, the poetry collection, In Thailand, It Is Night, and the co-editor of What Are You Looking At?, the first fat fiction anthology, and Scoot Over Skinny, the fat nonfiction anthology, with his friend Donna Jarrell. Originally from Oak Lawn, Illinois, he was educated at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and the Ohio State University. He's previously taught at SUNY Oswego and the University of South Florida. Currently, he's the Richard L. Thomas Professor of Creative Writing at Kenyon College in Ohio. And in addition to writing and teaching, at least according to the internet, he lives a very full life of playing video games and disc golf, kid wrangling, painting pottery, and contributing in many ways to a positive national writing community. Welcome, Ira, and thanks for joining our community tonight. I'm going to hand it over to you to hear some of your work.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining me this evening. What I'm going to do today is I think I'm just going to read a little bit from This Jade World and just part of a chapter, and then just kind of have a conversation, do a Q&A afterwards. And that's actually my favorite part anyway, is just to talk writing, right? One of the things I miss dearly, of course, is the ability to be in person and see you all. But I think, you know, this is what we have. And I don't know, but there's positive and negatives, of course, to virtual events, one of which I think it's more accessible and more people can come to it. But you know, please feel free at the end to ask anything about the writing world, the writing life. I'm on sabbatical right now, so I'm really doubly excited to be here because I've kind of only spent my sabbatical thus far with my 5-year-old. And I'm supposed to be working on other work, but really I'm just tending to his needs and wants as, you know, as 5-year-olds. That's just like the rule of 5-year-olds in many ways, right? So I'm really happy to be among writers and readers to just kind of just talk about the literary life. This Jade World was a really difficult memoir. The process of writing this memoir was unlike any other work I've ever done. I always tell my students that to write memoir, to write anything, you need nonfiction, you need some sort of emotional distance from the work. But with This Jade World, I began writing this book a year after my divorce, right? So the premise of the memoir is I married young and I married an older poet. And we were together for 15 years. And when we decided to split, I realized I didn't know what I want. I didn't know what wanting was, right? For a long time, my wants were her wants, right? I was a bird watcher. I loved nature. And this is from a kid who grew up in like the South Side of Chicago, who like the only nature was like a pigeon, right? Or like earthworms drying on the concrete sidewalks. But I realized after we split that I didn't really know what I wanted. And this memoir is really about trying to figure out what it is I want in life, right? And though, you know, one of the things that I'm often asked about, you know, writing a divorce memoir is that this is not the typical divorce memoir because it's not a memoir of blame. Because my ex Katie and I, we remain friends. We're best friends. We work together on our nonprofit called Sweet, a Literary Confection. This memoir is really about trying to understand the self, and really, when she had written an email asking, or for the possibility of a breakup, though it was so devastating for me, because I think it was devastating because not because I didn't expect it, but I had gotten comfortable with unhappiness, that even the loss of that comfortableness of unhappiness was scary. But I thought that email was the bravest thing she'd ever done, and the best thing for us, because it really opened up this kind of avenue for me to explore the things that I want. And one of those things was a child, right? The ability to be a father. So this is a chapter here called What I Want. And it's most of the memoir is set on my yearly trip to Thailand. I visit my mom and Auntie Sue, who they worked in Chicago for 36 years as nurses. And then, when they saw that I was, employed as a writer, or they were like, I can go back home and spend the rest of my life there. So I go back every year or every 6 months to go check on them. So it's set in Thailand. And this is the one of the trips back. What I want. Rayong is a fishing city 3 hours outside of Bangkok, along the Gulf of Thailand. After the fall of Ayutthaya in 1767 to the Sukrungruang dynasty of Burma, King Thaksin fled to the coastal town. During his time in the city, he built a navy and gathered forces to reclaim what Burma had taken. This was one of the last wars against Siam's enemies of the north, wars that had been carried on for centuries over land and greed and pride. In the center of the city is a shrine in honor of the king. A statue of him sits on a golden throne, his hands on his sword that rests on his lap, his head held high, chin tilted to the right, as if expecting more danger to come, as if expecting the rise of another enemy. I wonder if King Thaksin expected us, in a hired van heading for the coast, us hungry for seafood, hungry for the salt air, hungry to be away from the pollution of Bangkok. Us, the silly brigade of mother, son, aunt, on a weekend trip in a vehicle stocked with so much food and water, it would survive a zombie apocalypse for years. My mother and Auntie Sue converse with the driver, Supon, a close friend of the family. When there are long trips, Auntie Sue uses his services. He drives the way old lady likes, she says, which means slow and attentive to bathroom breaks every 30 minutes. Supon's kindness is in his smile, his eagerness to converse. He's a good man, a full-time soldier. And because the country is under military rule, he only drives on weekends, like this Saturday, dedicating the rest of the week to the needs of the state. The three of them talk about the intricate politics of the country. I barely understand how America works, having failed the mandatory high school constitution test twice before finally passing. I remain quiet and listen, my gaze out the window and into the lush green of the land. America is threatening to cut its support, says Supon. They want democracy now. Democracy, democracy, Auntie Sue says. It's only a word. They don't know what it's like here, says my mother. Democracy is not an answer to everything, Auntie Sue says. Supon speaks of the Civil War that nearly broke out between the Reds and Yellows, the violence that took over the Capitol, the assassination attempts on political leaders. A week ago, a poet activist was murdered at a busy intersection of Bangkok. Supon shakes his head. His hand tightens around the wheel. I love my country, he says. I want the best for it. Each evening before soap operas, the TV broadcasts the amendments of martial law and updates of the country, which politicians have been removed, who has been arrested, who is corrupt, what is the timeline for the new election. For the time being, the military has restored peace. In the States, my friends would ask what's happening in Thailand, and when I tell them it's under martial law, they scoff, stupid military brutes. I understand their antipathy. I share it too. I remember Tiananmen Square, the image of a tank and the protester. But Thailand politics are different. Thailand's culture is different. It wants to be seen as modern, but retain its cultural identity. It is a mix of 100-year-old temples and modern high-rises. It is Bali prayer and modern pop music. It is a country that lacks an identity, having its feet in both worlds. What does each side want? I ask. My mother pins her eyes to the blurring landscape. Supon maneuvers the van around a stray dog sunning in the road. Ahead, the ocean laps the Rayong shoreline. For the other side not to win, Auntie Sue says. What is it you want? I posit this question to my college students. I often put them on the spot. Some will say, I want a burger. I ask, why do you want a burger? Some will say, because I'm hungry. I ask, but out of all the foods in the world, why a burger and not a donut? Some will keep answering my questions, which I'm endless with. Some will shrug. Some will become frustrated and tell me to let it go. Some, when posed with the question of want, will not know what to say. They will stutter. They will shrug. Once a student cried, want has that kind of power. When I was younger, there was a simplicity to my wants. I wanted every toy in existence. I wanted every candy bar. I wanted to press every button on an elevator. Wanting for children is a way of experiencing life, understanding the things rotating the earth. I drove my parents mad with my wanting. My mother cursed the day I learned the word want. My father shook his head at it. Often, I hid among stuffed animals at toy stores until my parents gave in to my wants and bought me that teddy bear I would tire of an hour later. But the older I became, my wants became less about material things and more about the intangible, an emotion, a sense of well-being. My wants morphed into an existential crisis that most of the time related to mortality. I want to go to Europe before I die. I want to be skinny just once in my life. I want to experience true happiness. I want to be a father. Suddenly, we have a checklist of how we want to part with this world and perhaps how we want to be remembered. For the longest time, I prayed to Buddha as if a genie and asked for the same three things: peace for all dogs and cats, for my mother and aunt to live long, healthy lives, for my marriage with Katie to last forever. The last of these wishes began on July 10th, 2002, the moment Katie and I were married at Wat Suan Dog in Chiang Mai. The morning had been hectic, the wedding service long. I could see fatigue in Katie's eye, the heat running up her cheeks, perspiration glistening her forehead. I felt it too, this tiredness that weighed me down more than the sweat-drenched shirt. So I ducked out. I sat in the main vihan, alone in the cavernous hall, the walls covered in murals of Buddha's life, from prince to enlightened one. A looming gold Buddha towered over me, his face serene. The Buddha at this temple was different from the others in the country. He was alert, black pupils standing out from the whites of his eyes instead of his usual dreamlike repose. It was as if this Buddha was challenging any onlooker to a staring contest. Look at me, he proclaimed. I dare you. I stared at him because he was beautiful, because he was silent. He was the silent observer on the special day of my life, because I believe holding his gaze would somehow give me the strength for the days and years to come. I sat on my knees, though my legs were sore, and then bowed my head 3 times. The sun, which had remained hidden for most of the morning, began to peek through layers of gray. It was there, my hands pressed together, that I made my wish. There below this alert Buddha, I said in a whisper, I wanted Katie and I to last forever. I said it in Thai and in English. I said it because though I didn't know it then, I was scared. I was scared I would end up like my parents, divorced and unhappy. I feared failure. This fear eluded me for months and years, even hours before the wedding. But it was there then, and it felt like like a constriction over my chest. It made me take short breaths, made me sweat even more. This fear lasted a few short seconds before my mother called for me, and I rushed out to be with my family and new wife. It seems silly to wish a marriage forever. A long-lasting marriage is nothing to wish for, it is something to work for. Still, the notion of wish represents an absence. A child wishes for a new bike because she does not have a new bike. A man wishes for a promotion because he lacks a sense of monetary or social success, and he believes a promotion will give him that. During the years my mother and father fought, I wish they would stop and be happy because happiness had evaporated from our suburban home. I wished and wished and wished. I wished the impossible. I wished for certainty when the world provided enigmatic answers. My wishes were filled with loaded words like all and forever, words that illustrated how badly I wanted. The Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, calls unrealistic wishes the path and the flower. You want the flower, but you do not seek the path to the flower. You want to be with your wife forever, but what path have you taken to ensure that this happened? Is a path toward forever even possible? I understand this. I understand logically that we need to look at the steps we take to achieve our dreams and desires instead of dwelling on the dream itself. I understand this. I understand this is what Buddha teaches, to think through our actions, to interrogate the self. I understand, I do. But still, I cling to wishes. I keep wishing because wishes are hope, and a life without hope is a sad one, even when disappointment sometimes follows. After the divorce, I no longer knew what I wanted, not in the larger sense. What happened in the year between my visits to Thailand was I stopped believing in the impossible. I stopped believing. You're so good with kids, Katie said one day. I was, always had been. I found myself in tune with them. I enjoyed being around them. Katie's nieces and nephews thought I was their personal jungle gym. I was fine with that. I babysat them while the adults played cards upstairs or went out for a fancy dinner. I knew the language of kids and had the patience to entertain their endless questions. I made them laugh with my goofiness. Early on in the marriage, Katie expressed her concern. Perhaps we were in Wisconsin visiting her oldest brother's family, and I had just spent the day with the nieces and nephews. Perhaps it was Illinois with another brother whose wife had just given birth to a baby boy, and I carried and coddled that boy for days. Wherever we were, Katie wanted to talk, and I knew in the concern in her face, the way her brows furrowed together, the way she nibbled on the corner of her lip, that the conversation would be hard. I don't want to take away an opportunity from you, she said. You're not. You understand them, she said, but I don't want them. Kids aren't something I understand, she said. They smell, I said, and drool. She laughed and looked at her feet, but seeing you with them makes me think this is what you want. I don't. I reached for her hands, held them. Are you sure? I am. My love for her made me sure. I reconfigured who I was, pushed aside all the things I had planned and dreamt and wanted. Before Katie, having children was a given. This is what Thai people did. We married, had kids, lots of kids. My mom was one of 9. Auntie Sue was one of 7. When I went to Thailand, there were lots of cousins, and each year I seemed to meet another one. My want for a child was more than cultural and familial expectations. It was born from a memory, one that had stuck for years, one that replayed over and over after Katie left, feeding my want into a frenzy, making me lose myself in research of adoption. When asked why I wanted a child, It is this cloudy memory that hovers, this faded image that sticks, this warm and comfortable feeling, like the unwavering certainty of first love. It is a simple memory. I am 4, holding the first baby of my life, a baby holding a baby. I don't remember where I was. I remember sitting in a chair and holding this baby. I don't remember whom the baby belonged to. I remember the baby was small in my small arms. I remember the baby smell, fresh talcum powder, clean detergent. I remember someone, maybe my father, a man for sure, instructing me not to touch the baby's head, that the skull hadn't hardened yet. I remember thinking, what an odd notion, a soft skull. I remember how irresponsible I remember how irresistible the baby's head was. And I remember someone, maybe Auntie Sue, but maybe not, complimenting on my gentleness, and someone asking whether I wanted a baby someday. And I said yes, and whether I'd be a good father. And I said yes. And the stillness of that baby in my arms and the stillness I felt in my body. I wanted a baby. I want a baby. I wanted to be a father. I want to be a father. Am I taking something away from you? Katie said. You can't take away something I don't want, I said. A week after Katie and I were married, Auntie Sue wanted to show us the Rayong beaches, one of the first tourist destinations before the development of the southern islands. We stopped first at a local market to buy dried seafood. Katie couldn't stomach the smell. She gagged and fanned her nose with a fantasy book she had been reading on the trip. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, she said. I took her hand and pulled her into the nearest 7-Eleven to buy potato chips and Thai iced tea. That was unbearable, Katie said. I almost puked. I laughed and called her the whitest woman in America, a nickname that stuck for the duration of our relationship. Katie is not wrong about the smell. It is everywhere in Rayong. It lingers in the salted air of the ocean, in the aisles of markets, in the temples we visit. Rayong is famous for dried seafood and fish sauce, nampra, its #1 export. The smell of fish sauce fills the entire cavity of the nose for hours. It is as if you've walked into a room full of room full of dead and rotting fish. I love that smell. Younger, I used to bring a bottle of fish sauce to my nose and breathe in deeply as if it were a bouquet of roses. When Kate and I moved to Florida, I shipped our bottles of fish sauce through the mail. I don't know what went through my mind to think this was a good idea. I only knew I couldn't part with fish sauce the way Katie couldn't part with her Earl Grey tea and honey, which came in another box. When our mail lady, the poor soul, delivered the box to Katie, her face green, our package with hazmat stickers all over it, she simply said, something broke, and rushed away. The mail person hates us, Katie said. Probably, I said. But the smell of fish sauce, even the overpowering stench of it from that box, made our new home in Florida feel like a home, despite the fact we had to throw the box directly into the garbage. Fish sauce signifies Thailand. The smell of it instantly transports me there. Or not Thailand exactly, but the Thai kitchen in our suburban home in Chicago, Auntie Sue cooking our meals, our family whole. Fish sauce has become a metaphor the way Katie has become the Illinois fields. And my new love, Deidre, is whatever flower I see. When you fall in love, you see more than the person in front of you. You see all she represents. You see yourself in that landscape you don't want to let go. We are in the safety of the van behind tinted windows, waiting for Auntie Sue, who's purchasing dried squid. I can tell tourists from natives. Tourists are the ones with handkerchiefs over their noses, with sour faces. Tourists are the ones my mother and I make fun of. Oh, he's definitely not from around here, my mother says, pointing at a man taking a breath from the crook of his arm. I point to a group of women pinching their noses and grimacing. One of them holds a handkerchief to her face. Look at them, I say. They can't take the smell either. Farang, foreigner. Like Katie, my mother says and laughs. She was so funny. It was funny, though Katie didn't think so at the time. My mother loved Katie despite her aversion to fish sauce. She became part of the family because now she had her own story. Now my mother would talk about her daughter-in-law who couldn't stand the smell of the thing that made Thailand, Thailand. The mention of Katie quiets us. I'm not sure what my mother thinks. I know she worries, but she doesn't push. No one pushes. They say they're happy for me as long as I am happy. Things begin and end. Does your new girlfriend like fish sauce? My mother says. She likes Thai food. We'll take her here whenever she comes and see what happens. Skip ahead a little bit. Supon stops at a market so my mother can jump out of and buy fruit. Throughout the car ride, she's been moaning about how her stomach wants fruit, and fruit is nowhere to be found, only seafood, seafood, and more seafood. There's too much fish here, she says. Auntie Sue tells her that fish live in water, and we are near water. Fish, 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 my mother says. The way my mother complains is the way I complain, whiny, a spoiled child. We want what we want. Supon maneuvers the van under a series of underpasses. Underneath, vendors sell a variety of goods from fresh mackerel to beef tripe to Hello Kitty pencils to baskets and baskets of fruit. There's a rhythm to outdoor markets in Thailand, ordered chaos. My mother peruses fruit while I wander aisles, dodging patrons. I take in all the food, grilled chicken livers and hearts, coconut custard cups topped with scallions and fried fish cakes. I stop to check out the silver tubs of curry, green, red, yellow, like swirls of oily paint, and bottles of fish sauce like dark rum. At the Publix in Florida, you grab a number at the lunch meat counter and wait. If someone accidentally bumps you, you say, excuse me. There's no waiting here. No excuse me. Someone will bump you. Those long years my mother lived in Chicago, she was timid, always depending on Auntie Sue to do most things. But here now, she assumes a more aggressive posture, pointing at large baskets of mangosteen and rambutan. Because she is old, my mother commands respect from the vendors. Is it sweet? My mother asks in a tone that suggests a command, not a question. She holds a rambutan in her hand. It looks like a fiery red ball, an alien fruit with spikes. Yes, ma'am, the vendor says. She's aged by the sun. It's a distinguishing characteristic among the social classes, skin color. My mother's skin is pale and powdered and middle class. She wears a large brim hat to keep the sun at bay. Are you sure it's sweet? My mother says. Yes, ma'am. It's from my garden, ma'am. It's the sweetest, I assure you. When were they collected? My mom says. This morning, ma'am, I climbed the tree myself. You are not selling me old fruit, right? No, ma'am, the freshest. I want to taste this. My mother thrusts the rambutan at the vendor. The vendor cuts the fruit in half. Inside is an opalescent pearl. My mother observes it as if the viscosity of a fine wine before popping it into her mouth. She is deliberate when she chews, slow, purposeful. Then she spits out the woody seed. I'll take 5 kilos. Yes, ma'am. You will give me a good price. Yes? Yes, ma'am. I'm only buying from you. Thank you, ma'am. I'll come back tomorrow if your price is right. Yes, ma'am. They go back and forth with numbers, settling on one that appeases both parties. This is acceptable, my mother says. I want you to remember my face, okay? I will come back and you will remember to give this old woman a good price, okay? This is how things are negotiated. A directness I am unaccustomed to, a command I never knew my mother possessed. To choose fruit is easy. To want fruit is to want pleasure, an appeasement of the taste buds. My mother wanted fruit. She got fruit. In the van, she eats happily, staring at fishing boats rocking in the Gulf. I think she has wanted all her life, a faithful husband, a Thai daughter-in-law, a grandchild. And those big wants have slipped through her fingers. Those big wants have eluded her. And now she wants fruit, sweet, delicious fruit. Miracle fruit changes the tongue. One bite and for hours all you eat is sweet, writes the poet Amy Nezuka Mataro. Sweet is what my mother wanted, but it's also how the sweet is received, at what price, at what time of day. with full command and presence. This sweet is not a gift, it is a taking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ira. Well,
I would love to answer any questions at all from anyone.
great. Well, I have a one that came up in the chat here from Mel that I'll start with because it follows on your piece really nicely. So she says, I love the movement from historical contextualization of the space to the occupation of that space by the individual, the family, community, collective, and the personal. The beautiful weaving of macro and micro. I'd love to hear more about the choices in revising to get to that balance versus drafting. And she's specifically talking about the opening paragraphs of the chapter.
Okay. That's an awesome question. Thank you for that. You know what? When I did the first draft, I remember, okay, the first draft of this book, I wrote actually on that first trip back to Thailand. And I wrote as quick as possible that by the time my trip ended, which was about 5-6 weeks later, I'd finished the first draft of that book. But that book was only 110, 120 pages, right? And it was very much about the what happened, right? And so in the process of revision, this is why I love revising, right? One of the things I love about revision is, one, I ask in a much more direct way the responsibilities of whatever chapter I'm writing about. And two, I ask whether or not I'm giving enough information to my readers about, say, the landscape or the place we're traveling to, like Rayong, right? And the beaches. And the curious thing about this is that I had gone to Thailand so often. I've been to Rayong since I was a child, right? We've gone there over and over again, but I never really did the research on place or the historical significance of place, right? Or how this was the place where King Thaksin and the Thai military fled to kind of gather themselves before initiating another attack on Burma, now Myanmar. And once I started looking into the history of it, and I love this about research, things start clicking in my head. This is a chapter about want, right? You know, the country right now, the country of Thailand at that time period, the country of Thailand right now is in a very precarious moment of wanting, right? It's a struggle of want. We have an older generation that want one thing, and we have a young, much more political active group wanting something else, right? This was the case with Thaksin when he wanted his land back. This was I think wanting governed everything in so many ways. I loved, you know, when I did the research, how metaphor kind of opens up from the information that kind of presents itself, right? But that first draft was without it. That first draft was without a lot of the kind of digging that goes on in the revisiting of a text.
Great, that's awesome. I was scribbling stuff down saying as you were going. So another about the smells. So Mel's again, the fish and the fish sauce and the comfort of smells from childhood and how they can ambush us. And she wants to know if you could hear more about the incorporation of scent as memory and creating a home scent. In this case, it was the fish sauce as a metaphor into that particular chapter.
You know, it's so interesting because my upbringing, my childhood it revolved around food. So it wasn't just the fish sauce. It was the smell of the curries that my aunt cooked up. She was one of the most amazing cooks of all time. It wasn't just the Thai food either. It was it was the Oscar Mayer Wiener salad, right? That she would have to do because she couldn't find certain like Thai sausages. So she used Oscar Mayer Wiener salad. And so these sensory details of food in my childhood are really big entryways to memory for me. They open a lot of doors. And I think they're open a lot of doors because I remember my family always saying, you are Thai, this is Thailand, what we're giving you is Thailand. And though I thought of it as that, really when I have these smells like fish sauce, or when I think of these salads or noodles that my aunt had cooked up, I don't think of Thailand. I think of my Thai family in a Chicago kitchen, right, making these things up. Right. So this, for me, a lot of times for me to access, those memories, the first thing I do is evoke the senses, right? Whether it's sound or smell, right? This is the thing that automatically we do subconsciously immediately, right? We see something, we smell something, and suddenly we're thinking of something, we're remembering something, right? We don't know, it just happens just instantly. But if I struggle, for example, if I struggle with accessing a full memory, what I usually do is I try to think of the sensorial details around that moment to try to give me maybe an access way to the things that maybe I've forgotten, right? And anyone who knows fish sauce knows that you don't forget fish sauce. Like it's there, it lingers.
Great. And I have another question here. Brianna says, I loved reading from the archives. We leave the beaches for the tourists. And they're wondering if that was based on beaches from Thailand.
Yes, we leave the beaches for the tourists. Wow, thank you for that. That's a poem I had written many years ago, and it was a poem. It was a poem in response to the tsunami tragedy that happened. When I visited Thailand, especially the southern parts of Thailand, after the tsunami, my uncle who works at the resorts just drove me around, and the amount of stories of people seeing ghosts, because the poems were about, the poem was about seeing tourist ghosts, white ghosts, right? European ghosts on the beaches all the time. And so that poem was born from that idea of loss, right? And what was taken away was what was sucked away. Yeah, and one of the things that I kept coming back to, and I don't remember the poem quite well, but I do remember the image that when I spoke to someone, a noodle vendor, she said no one knew what was going on, but suddenly the sea had sucked in that you could see so far. It was so dry, you could see fish, you could see the coral, you could see everything. It was like this magical world that opened up, that people rushed in to get the fish, to like, oh wow, what's happening, let's go get some food, right? Meanwhile, every single animal, the dogs, the elephants who were taking tourists on on rides, were like, hell no, we're heading up the mountain. There was something about that moment they knew, like, this is not right. And so a lot of people were swept away in that moment because they went back in because they thought, wow, what an anomaly, like this is great. So that poem was born from the idea of the ghosts that stay, right, that never leave us, right? I think we've just kind of celebrate, like we not celebrate, we just had September 11th. The ghosts there do not leave us, right? They're always constantly there.
Thank you. That was really great. Another question here from Patricia, asking, you said you wrote the first draft a year after your divorce, and how long did it take you to finish it? Say the biggest difference between the first and last draft was.
Yeah, well, okay. So I wrote the first draft, 120 pages in a year. I actually finished the book about 6 years later, right? And I think that first draft was a discovery draft, was a draft with the door closed, I call it, right? Because I wasn't writing for any audience yet. I was writing for me, right? I was talking about how I didn't have this emotional distance, right? Which I always tell my students, you have to have emotional distance, that reflective voice, that retrospect, right? To kind of look at your memories and try to think about other ways into that memory. But I think for me, writing this book gave me a deeper understanding of, not to say that I was going through a trauma, but I do think people who experience trauma or experience earth-shattering things in their lives, they can't write about anything else because they're always constantly thinking about that thing, right? And so when the divorce happened, right, I had been working on another book and I couldn't work on that book anymore. I stopped writing that book because I couldn't think of anything else. And so really that first draft was, okay, you have to write this. You have to write this for you, right? And then subsequently, a year or 2 or 3 goes by and suddenly I'm revising, I'm shaping, I'm adding, I'm filling out. I've grown, right? I had, fallen in love again. I had remarried. I was having a child. I was a different person from that person sitting and writing that first draft. And that began to give another dimension to the book itself, right? So, I would say first draft 120 pages. At 2 or 3 years later, it was 600 pages, and then it finally found its form at around 300 something. So it was also one of the things I always tell my students is like, when you revise, open the floodgates, like really just go at it, overwrite the hell out of it. My theory is it's so much easier to cut than it is to add, right? So overwrite the hell out of it, and then you pare it down, right, to what you think is the essential part, the essential story that you're trying to get at.
Well, I don't know about anyone else, but that was exactly what I needed to hear tonight to help me with my own revision. Thank you so much for that answer. Really inspiring. It's so good to remember that we're always coming back to a project from a different place, right? It takes so much time.
Well, and I forgot to add, I think I should add this too, for something, the question also about like, what was the biggest revelation? I think I spent that first draft because I was still very much good friends with my ex. I didn't want to, I felt very protective of her in this book too, right? I felt protective of her. I felt protective of Deidre, who is, my wife, and I didn't really want to go into the relationship. I skirted the relationship. In fear of in fear of hurting them, right? In fear, because I love them so much, right? In fear of hurting them. But my wife had found at the time, she was, we were just kind of dating. She had read the original. She's like, you have so much work to do, right? And she said something. It's not like she's like, you're not just protecting Katie or me, you got a big shield over yourself too, right? And so I didn't like hearing it. I remember being really mad hearing it actually. But then she was completely right. She was completely right. And that's, I think, the vulnerability that comes with the genre of memoir, right? But that's also the reason why we readers like memoir. We write that idea of connection via vulnerability.
Really nice. I like that connection via vulnerability. Lisa asks, what's the best advice you received from a mentor or advisor about writing?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. The thing that I think might be helpful for people who are wrestling with memoir or writing life, right? Writing life stories. And it goes back to what I was saying, that idea of protection, the idea of the self, right? The idea of not wanting to see yourself as a character, or not to have too much suffering in it. Try to protect yourself from that. I think one of my mentors said, you need to rip the bandage off, right? To really effectively write nonfiction, especially memoir, you have to rip a bandage off, and you have to look at the wound as it is, right? You need to see it as it is. And you have to, and this is something that was really important too, you have to separate the product from the process, right? Which is to say, when you write a memoir, you can't think of it as you don't try to think about it as a book and what that book will do yet. You have to just go through that hard journey, the process of writing one, to realize, one, whether you're able to look at that wound, two, whether you want that wound to be looked at by others, right? So when you begin kind of propelling yourself forward to like, this book is going to be published, what's going to happen, you actually neglect what's really the work that needs to happen, which is the sitting down, the reliving, rethinking, reimagining, right? That writers do when they write about their lives.
All right, and I'm gonna slip in with one of my questions because it follows up this one, which is, what is the worst piece of writing advice you were ever given?
I think any writing advice that, man, there's been a lot, but anything that starts with "don't do this," right? There's this is really wonderful fiction textbook, Making Shapely Fiction by Jerome Stern. And he has in the middle of this book like this list of do's and don'ts, right? Don't do that. Don't like end the story and then you woke up, or like and it was a dream or something, right? Like and then at the end, the last one is like, don't listen to anyone, saying don't. I think I think a lot of my career is especially in the last 5 years, have been challenging the don'ts for me, right? To challenge myself, to challenge the don'ts and make something of it, to make something that is, that has, all the things that you look for in good writing, right? I believe, to me, in the infinite possibilities of what you can do with the written word. This is probably why I write in all the genres, because I want to put different lenses on all the time, right? I never want to feel constrained or limiting, right? My new theory as a teacher, a teacher of writing, is I don't spend time telling students don't. I just spend a lot of time listening to what they want to do and helping them achieve what they want to do, instead of saying don't do this, don't do that. Right? That's my new philosophy in the last 5-6 years of teaching.
Yeah, excellent philosophy, and I love that Jerome Stern well, and that that example of don't have a dream where you wake up. It's like a classic thing that I think people are told in their introduction to fiction class, and yet if Lewis Carroll, right, had heard that, right, we might not have Alice in Wonderland, right? And
absolutely.
Nobody complains about that, right? Nobody
no
complains about Alice. And let's see, I have Jim, let's see, negotiating the chat here. Oh, what advice do you have for future MFA graduates and changed in recent years? This is from Brian.
So I could repeat that question.
What advice do you have for soon to be MFA graduates, and has that advice shifted in any recent years at all?
Mhm. If you are about to finish your degree in MFA, my biggest advice is go into the finishing your last year with in your MFA with a lot of momentum that feeds your creative energy afterwards. I think the hardest thing post MFA is actually writing, right? There seems to be this like almost like a big breath that gets let out when you receive the degree, right? You've completed your coursework, you've completed the possibilities of a book, right? Which should feel awesome. And then it's easy for a lot of recent graduates to say, I need to take a break, right? But I think we live in such an uncertain world that breaks could be so long. I can keep going, right? I look at, say, graduates who graduate during the pandemic and what their writing life is like because they've been challenged with so many other things, right? In terms of time and management and and stuff like that. So I always encourage, like, let's go, like every time I talk with my graduate students, especially in their last semester, we have a meeting that says, what are the things you're really happy about? What are the things that gets you excited? What do you want to keep working on? Like, what's that thing you want to keep doing, right? What's that second book, right? You just wrote a great thesis. Maybe you should put that away. You said you want to put it away. Let's talk about what you want to do for your second book. Because to me, the end of the MFA is actually the beginning of your writing career. That's really the truth of it, because now you have to write without the deadlines, right? And probably absent of the peers that you had before. So what ways will you be feeding that creative energy? And I was very fortunate in my life to just keep working in academia, but I know of students who didn't, but they worked really hard before they graduated to create a community so that when they graduated, they just kind of inserted themselves into that community, right? So they planned before. So that would be my advice, right? Carry momentum, right? Remember the joy. And really, really, it was exhausting finishing that book, but you should all feel pretty damn proud of what you've accomplished in writing, whatever you're writing, your projects, and turning it in, right? I think a lot of times we don't celebrate that enough. We just celebrate, oh my God, we're done. Good, we're done. Sign the paper, give you my degree, right? But no, you guys, I mean, you guys worked really hard, and we should celebrate that fact. Should be proud of that. Right? We need writers of all artists need something they need to feel proud about, right? And love. That's the fuel that keeps us going too.
This one follows on that, which is, do you have writers groups? How important have those been to you? And do you recommend starting one? Maybe you already answered that, but I'll let you say a few more words about it.
I don't have a regular writing group. I have regular people who always read my work, right? I have like my ex Katie reads everything. She read this book. She read this book until she said, I can't read this book anymore. Um, this is your story. I know it's your story. Thank you for writing it. It's beautiful. I can't do it anymore. But she reads everything, right? She reads everything I write. But I have a few friends who I turn to that I trust to read certain books when I'm stuck on. But I don't have writing group. I've had writing groups before, and my biggest tip about writing groups is make sure you structure it, right? Because writing groups could easily devolve into praise fest, right? And if there's no structure in the group, it could suddenly not be a writing group anymore. It could be wine tasting, or like it could be dinner club pretty quickly, right? So I'm always like, every time someone says like, make sure you have ground rules and you talk about it as a group, what will help I think what might be helpful too is that when I graduated, there were times where I needed someone to read my work and not give me hard criticism yet, right? And I would tell them, I'm like, hey, listen, John's one of my great readers, my first reader, John, I want you to read this, and all I want you to say is that it's good and I should keep going, and that you like certain parts. I need that from you right now, because right now I think it all sucks. So I need you to give me that, right? And then I can say, John, I'm done. Go to it. Tell me, and I mentioned John Chopin, who is a fiction writer, and he was one of my first students. I taught at Oswego, and he wrote this story collection called Veteran Crisis Center. It's an amazing book. But he looked at this Jade World, and he's like, yeah, man, like, you need to cut the first 70 pages. I was like, shit. Right. But he was right. Right. And that I needed him to say that. And I trusted him. And there's that trust, that I've been sending my work, that he's not doing it. He's doing it for the betterment of the book, not something that he would do. Right. Like I think, like, when you have really good readers, you're in tune with each other's kind of process and and art, right? Because we read each other's work so much, right? So he knew exactly what to say, and I mean, I really do think his suggestions here is the final version of this book. A lot of it is the final version of this book.
I love that, those trusted readers, and one of my close trusted readers I found in graduate school. And so, to our students, I would just say, keep an eye out for the people who are reading you well now, and do what you can to make those relationships. I think we have one last question, and this is from Jim, and it has to do with this multi-genre nature of your work, Ira. And it's, did you write fiction first, and how did you make the move from fiction to nonfiction, or vice versa? And also poetry, right? You poetry. So how did you kind of move through that in your career? Where is it going now?
So I started writing fiction. I was a 19-year-old fiction writer at Southern, attending Southern Illinois University, and I was writing horrendous, terrible fiction, right? But I was really cocky about it too. I would send all my fiction to the New Yorker, and I used like a pen name or a pseudonym. I used Pierce Tan because Amy Tan was the only Asian American writer I knew at the time, and Pierce because my stories would pierce your soul. And then I would get like a rejection from the New Yorker, like, a week later. And when you get rejected, when you used to get rejections in the mail, and it's like on this beautiful linen letterhead, right? It's this huge, beautiful, and then in tiny font at the very top is like, sorry, we can't take your story. And then all this blank space, right? I had a mentor, and I think he's one of the best writers, American novelists. His name was Kent Harif. He wrote this, the books Plain Song and Benediction. His last book, Our Souls at Night, he was the one who actually got me into the writing path. He says, I think you need to take nonfiction. I just think you have things to work out about being a Thai American man. And so in nonfiction, I had questions, right? I had things that I needed to figure out that I've never asked myself before, because, I grew up trying to deny sometimes the Asian part of me so that I wouldn't be ostracized or exiled from groups, right? But I was in a position now to see, like, these things. I want to learn more of these things. I want to understand what, my parents' unhappiness, in Chicago, living in Chicago for so long. And if you're born an immigrant son, you inherit that unhappiness. And then, so all these questions that nonfiction made me ask were vital, were important, were things I need to face and confront, right? The problem when I was writing fiction before is I didn't know anything about the world. I didn't ask any questions. I was writing about things I had no clue about. I was writing about cooking, but I didn't know how to, like, boil an egg, right? Like, that was the problem with my fiction. I didn't confront real life situations. I was writing about revenge or death, but I don't really know the intricate nature of those things, right? I've watched them on TV, but I didn't feel them. And so nonfiction made me reconcile or put me in tension with all these things that I needed to confront. So that when I went back to fiction 3 or 4 years later, I was a much better fiction writer, right? Because I asked some really hard questions. I knew about the world a little bit. And at least I knew about my world a little bit, right? Because I think nonfiction is like this weird umbrella genre. I began writing very lyrical nonfiction, lyric essays, right? Essays that weren't bound by chronology, right? But were bound by fragmentation, right? And sound. I thought maybe I should write a poem, right? And so I was in my third year of grad school, and I started writing poems. But I never told my partner then, who was the ex in this Jade world, that I was writing poems, because I didn't want to make her jealous. So I just kept that like a big secret until I had my first poem publication came out, and I said, FYI, I just been writing poems for the past 3 years, right? So for me, you know, when the pronoun I in nonfiction is so important, and when I use it, the pronoun I is a pronoun of ownership. This is my story. I have a large stake in telling the story. It's a necessity that I tell the story, right? And that's when I go to nonfiction, right? During the divorce, actually, during the worst times of the marriage, during the declining times of marriage, I stopped writing nonfiction and I wrote fiction. And The Melting Season was a book that came out of that period, right? It was a dark period. And the reason I turned to fiction was I wanted my characters to suffer the way I was suffering, right? But I didn't want to take responsibility. In like nonfiction, you feel like you always are somewhat responsible for you, right? Like I think the biggest difference between fiction and nonfiction is this: like the character is flawed in fiction, but that sometimes is the story, right? And we as readers go like, don't do that, that's stupid, right? Don't do that, right? But this character does it anyway because, you know, they don't know, right? In nonfiction, you're flawed, you know you're flawed, and you're trying to figure out why you're flawed, right? I didn't want to figure out my crumbling relationship, right? I just wanted my characters to suffer. And so a lot of when I turned to fiction, and I did a lot during the pandemic, I turned to fiction because I just wasn't in the state of mind to do nonfiction, to really use that I. Because in fiction, I just, you know, sometimes it's just good to let your characters do his thing and not save them, right? And I turn to poetry when I'm trying to understand or create a language of an image or a metaphor. Jane Hirschfeld, in her first essay in Nine Gates, says that every time a poet goes to the page, they're creating a world, they're creating another language, right? And I love thinking about it in that way. I actually love thinking about it not only in my poems, but I like thinking about it in my essays, in my short stories, right? But in poetry, I'm trying to distill the image, trying to get at the essence of that language, the language, whatever the topic is of that poem that I'm trying to figure out, right? Someone had mentioned we leave the beach to the tourist. That's the language of loss. That's the language of what haunts, right? That I'm trying to get at, right? That's the language of the people who I had spoken to that says, we just see them all the time. We just see the ghost all the time, right? And so for me, poetry is a much more in-depth look at musicality, juxtaposition, right? And play.
I love that. Thank you so much. And that is of our time. This was really wonderful and really inspiring. It was so great to see so many students and other faculty popping in here. And thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope, thank you for spending your your evening with me. And if you do have other questions, please just shoot me an email. It's pretty easy, Sukrungruang at yahoo.com. So I'll get that. It's just my last name. There's no other Sukrungruang that will get that email. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and I want to wish everyone, really good luck with your art and your projects that you're working on. And also I want to say thank you for working on it during a time where it seems like it's so hard to work on art, right? To work on writing, but I also think it's so necessary too.
Thank you so much. And there's lots of, I know you can't see the chat, but I'm getting a lot of thank yous in the chat for you, Ira. Thanks everybody. I'm gonna end our meeting now. Have a great night.
Thank you. Take care.